somebody should be really talking about more in-depth issues. I think that sometimes conservatives and Republicans get very narrowly focused.
Making his case to become the next congressman of the 50th District. Meet the Republican challenging Duncan Hunter Jr. And after years of falling attendance, things are looking up at San Diego SeaWorld. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Charter schools cost San Diego Unified School District nearly $66 million last year. That's according to a report out today. KPBS education reporter Megan Burks breaks it down.
And here at Wilson Middle School in City Heights, the district says this vibrant neighborhood has been a real draw for people who want to start charter schools and in turn a drain on schools like Wilson. The report today breaks that down. When a child transfers to a charter school, she takes about $10,500 in state funding with her. The school she left saves more than half of that by not having a teacher, but it's still losing about $4,900 that would have gone to the school for fixed costs like a principal and air conditioning. Multiply that revenue loss by more than 22,500 kids who attend charters in San Diego, and the district sees a net loss of nearly $66 million. At a press conference today, parents talked about what that means for Wilson.
No matter what, we need janitors to clean up, lights to turn on. If you take away each kid that goes away to another charter school, pretty soon there's not going to be enough money for the school to turn their lights on. So all I'm saying is that charter schools are great, only to a certain point.
Charter school advocates called the report anti-charter school, pointing out the researcher and think tank behind it have ties with unions.
We want to see the neighborhood school be just as good. And what I think people aren't talking about in regards to charter schools is that charter schools bring a level of competition. And when a charter school moves into an area and does well, very often reports are showing that we're seeing the traditional neighborhood school also rise to the occasion.
But charters aren't the only boogeyman in school finances, especially as pension costs grow.
So there are many factors that put pressure on a school's budget. But with the scarce resources that we do have, why would we design a system around inefficiency?
The report authors and the district say they aren't anti-charter. They just want to be able to say when enough is enough, when there's too many charter schools in neighborhoods like City Heights. Currently, state law prohibits districts from considering their own finances when they decide whether or not to approve a charter. Reporting in City Heights, I'm Megan Burks, KPBS News.
San Diego's proposed Housing Commission budget takes money from permanent housing and puts it towards temporary shelters. Today, the City Council's Budget Review Committee reviewed this proposed $388 million budget. In it, there's more money for programs like the mayor's temporary tent shelters, but that's offset by less money going to long-term solutions like new permanent affordable housing. Councilman Chris Ward says the tent shelters are expensive, but they cannot be abruptly shut down.
So if this is the status quo going forward, we have to know that and own that, because I can't have 700 people today leave those shelters and come right back onto our streets.
Mayor Faulkner's 3 tent shelters are expected to cost just more than $10 million next fiscal year. His revised budget proposal is due out next week. The 4th District San Diego City Council race features an incumbent running for re-election against 3 challengers. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson says 2 will have a runoff in November.
District 4 is a working-class neighborhood tucked in the eastern part of the city. Neighborhoods like Choice View, Skyline, and Paradise Hills sit in a region known for rolling hills and diversity. The Diamond Business Association's Carlos Vasquez sees a district that's long been shortchanged at City Hall.
Working class people that are struggling to make ends meet and lacking in all the basic services that most of the city also already enjoys.
Incumbent Council President Myrtle Cole says she'll fight for funding and services to improve the community. Monica Montgomery says she'll work for economic opportunity and safe neighborhoods. Neil Arthur wants to make the office more responsive to the community and Tony Villafranca is a pro-life advocate who supports the less fortunate. Bishop George McKinney says the district needs a strong leader who can make themselves heard through the political chatter at City Hall.
We look to the council representative to be well-informed and aggressive in speaking truth to the power structure and representing the voiceless in the fight for justice and righteousness.
The primary's top two candidates will compete in a runoff election in November. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Our media partner iNewsSource is following the money this election season. Here with the latest cash report on that District 4 City Council race is iNewsSource reporter Jill Castellano.
There are 4 candidates competing for San Diego's City Council seat in District 4, which covers the southeastern section of the city. Incumbent Myrtle Cole is outraising and outspending the other candidates in the race. She has raised almost $40,000 since January and spent $54,000. Lawyer Monica Montgomery has raised $14,000 since January and spent $15,000. Real estate developer Neil Arthur has raised $11,000 during that time. And Tony Villafranca, who ran for the same seat in 2014, has not reported any money raised. To learn more about the money in politics, go to data.inewssource.org. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Jill Castellano.
Bill Wells is challenging Representative Duncan Hunter Jr. in an effort to move from the mayor of El Cajon to congressman. The Republican candidate is a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and building a border wall. He also says conservatives should focus more on social issues. So jumping right in, what qualifies you to represent the 50th district in Congress?
Well, I think those qualifications are in 2 levels. One is on professionally. In the world outside of politics, I've worked in mental health most of my adult life. I have a doctorate in psychology and a bachelor's degree in nursing. And I've worked in psychiatric hospitals, mostly with the severely mentally ill, people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, that kind of thing. But I've done just about everything you can do in the mental health field. And now I own my own company. We provide psychiatry and psychology services to low-income clinics.
And how will that psychology background, if elected, help you in Congress?
Well, frankly, I think that it's a perfect time for people with mental health backgrounds to be in Washington, because Washington is not addressing the fact that America has a national mental health crisis, not only with people that are directly suffering from mental health problems, but the associated problems, the tertiary problems of homelessness and drug addiction, alcohol addiction. All of this is part and parcel to the mental health crisis happening in America right now.
And how do you plan to compete against an incumbent with such name recognition as Representative Duncan Hunter Jr.?
Well, I'm not going to tell you it's not a big deal. That being a congressman is being an incumbent congressman is very, very powerful. But I've been around for a while too. I started in politics in El Cajon in 2004, and eventually I became mayor. And El Cajon has been in the national and the international spotlight for several issues. So I think people in the district know who I am, and I give them a choice, something different to vote for. And I think that that's going to be very powerful.
And why run against such a strong incumbent for this district? Why does the 50th district need a change?
Well, there's a lot of things that I disagree with Congressman Hunter on policy-wise. I was not happy that he voted for the omnibus spending package. I think that $21 trillion is far too much to be in debt for the nation. It's 105% of our GDP. And I worry about my kids and my grandkids. I don't want to see them have to suffer with that. But like I said before, I also think that somebody should be really talking about more in-depth issues. I think that sometimes conservatives and Republicans get very narrowly focused. And there's no reason why conservatism and republicanism can't also branch out and talk about social service type issues like mental health issues. I think we need to take a strong look at what has happened since we closed our state psychiatric hospitals throughout the country. And we have to reevaluate whether that was a good idea or not. I personally think it was a terrible idea. And I think the safety net for people with mental health problems and social problems has deteriorated significantly since then.
And another issue that's very pressing here in San Diego especially, President Trump's proposed border wall. Mm-hmm. If elected, would you support funding for the border wall project?
Yeah, I certainly would. You know, if I came home and I found the pipes had burst in my house was flooding, before I dealt with the flood, the first thing I do is I turn off the water. And I think that's what we're talking about at the border. Barriers work. I know there's a lot of debate about that, but if you look at Israel, barriers work. If you look at San Diego and the section of the border fence that San Diego has, after they put that in, crime went down significantly. Drug smuggling went down significantly. Sex trafficking went down significantly. And so I don't see a problem with a barrier. It doesn't mean, it has nothing to do with racism. It has nothing to do with trying to isolate the country. But it has to do with controlling your border, like controlling that water that was running into my house.
And when you say cut off that water, of course it's a metaphor, but we're talking about real people here. And as you are aware, there are people actually coming here seeking asylum this weekend even, part of a caravan. So what do you do about the humanitarian issue at hand where people are actually fleeing violence and turning to the U.S. for help? That has always been one of the main staples of being an American, is the ability to come here and run away from a violent, chaotic lifestyle and find the peace of democracy and freedom. And I don't want to cut that off. I think we need to offer that to people, but we need to do it in a organized fashion. We have to know who's coming in. We have to know about their background. We have to know what they can bring to the United States, and we have to have some ability to say yes or no. I think that if that were my house, I want to help people. I spent my life wanting to help people. But I don't just open the door and say anybody who wants to come in, come in. I screen people before I bring them into my house. And I think that same sentiment is applicable to the United States. There has been a call on the national level, and you saw it in El Cajon as well, for police reform. If elected, would you support police reform on a national level?
Yes, I'm in favor of helping the police to get better all the time. But I would be not in favor of taking an adversarial role with them where we basically come out, police departments, and say, you guys are bad guys and your intentions are bad. You're trying to hurt people. We're going to try to stop you from doing that. Because frankly, I don't believe that. From
a psychology perspective, would you agree or disagree that we all have intrinsic biases?
Absolutely.
And could that possibly come into play when you're doing your police work?
I mean, is it possible? I suppose, but that's not been my experience. I have, like I said, I've been involved in government now for 15 years, and I look at all of the complaints that are made, and we look at all the problems, and frankly, it's just not something I'm seeing. I'm not seeing racism in the police department. I'm not seeing bias in the police department. Do people have biases? Sure, but do they act upon those biases? No, they're professionals.
Mayor Wells, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Voters will decide who will lead San Diego County's top law enforcement agency in next month's primary election. Two-term incumbent Sheriff Bill Gore faces off against Sheriff Commander Dave Myers. Gore tells KPBS producer Michael Lipkin he's running for another term because there's still more work to be done.
Sheriff Gore, welcome.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.
Why are you running for re-election?
Well, I couldn't be prouder of the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. They've done wonderful work, and yet there's still work to be done. And I think I'm the one to lead that department for the next 4 years. Some unfinished business. We've done, like I say, amazing things both in our jails and on the criminal side, but there's unfinished business.
Talking about the jails, talking about mental health, there was a recent investigation by Disability Rights California. And they said that San Diego jails continue to face, quote, a suicide crisis. Here's what they found. They said that the county lacks an effective communication system between deputies and mental health staff about an inmate's situation. When you discovered that there's been a breakdown in this communication, how are deputies dealt with?
Let's take the underlying issue here with the crisis. They looked at a period in time of 2014, 2015. We've been working tirelessly for the last like 6 or 7 years since we took over this large responsibility to continually improve the mental health care in our facilities. Every one of our deputies has been to psychiatric emergency response training. We've increased our enhanced observation modules in our facilities. We've doubled the number of mental health clinicians in our facilities. We've contracted with Liberty Healthcare, a nationally recognized healthcare system in the United States, to provide mental health care in our jails. So I think when you look at the snapshot they looked at, and I invite your viewers to go on our website where we have all of our answers to their criticisms and what we've done to address these, posted on our website. Also, there was a grand jury report a couple of years ago. That's all on our website too, with the answers and what we've done to really improve the mental health care in our facilities. So like I say, it's a continuing challenge, but I think we're rising to the challenge in our facility.
I wanted to ask you about something that just happened a few days ago. There was a settlement reached on May 1st between, in two sexual misconduct cases between two women and San Diego Sheriff Deputy Richard Fisher. He was charged in February after 14 women had accused him. He is now on unpaid leave. Termination proceedings, from what I understand, are ongoing. Have those cases, though, led to any changes in your department in terms of how you handle accusations against a deputy?
No, I think it's important to look at how we handle that particular investigation. We were accused of slow walking this investigation. Nothing could be further from the truth, because when a deputy behaves inappropriately, or in this case criminally, it impacts every deputy out there. There's not a more serious investigation that we undertake. In the case of Deputy Fisher, when the second allegation came in, he was removed from the field. To our first concern, make sure nobody else was victimized. He was put on administrative assignment, and shortly after more victims came forward, we put him on administrative leave out of the office. I assigned 2 sexual assault detectives and 2 internal affairs detectives to work that investigation. We worked in conjunction with district attorney investigators, and I think when you look at the results, we took care of business. We did the investigation.
Do you think that's the same process you would carry out in the future if something happened? Or do you think that this has taught you anything about how you might change it going forward?
No, I think we would do it the same way. When you have allegations of misconduct or potentially criminal conduct, we do that. We do an investigation, and I'm proud of the investigation we did. In my mind, it was more important to do it right instead of doing it fast. And as you recall in that case, victims kept coming forward, and so we'd have to go back and talk to that victim and try to corroborate their stories. So it was a long investigation, but I think ultimately we did a thorough, complete investigation. Charges were brought, and the judicial system will take its course.
Assemblymember Shirley Weber has introduced a bill that would largely restrict officers from using deadly force except when necessary to protect human life, which would be a change from the legal standard we have now. Do you have a stance on that bill?
Yeah, I've looked at it. I find it problematic. I think the standard that we have now that came down from the U.S. Supreme Court in the Garner case, where it says it is reasonably objective person would use deadly force looking at the totality of the circumstances. I'm concerned when you start adding different things that a deputy or a peace officer has to go through before he makes that split-second decision, could have 2 effects. One, he won't get involved. He'll look the other way and go the other way, which I think we've seen in some areas around the United States. Deeply troubling to me. The second would be that moment of hesitation might cost him his life or somebody, an innocent person's life.
Thank you so much for coming in, Sheriff Gore.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me on.
This just into our newsroom. The Sheriff's Department has launched an internal review into a Facebook video showing deputies on the job in Vista. It appears the deputies were roughing up 2 restrained suspects. This incident happened after we interviewed Sheriff Gore last week. We want to warn you, this video may be disturbing. In a statement, a sheriff's spokeswoman says the deputies were responding to a domestic violence call, and they say the suspect was wielding a weapon. The sheriff's spokesman says the 2 men in the video also got into a fight with deputies. The spokeswoman says while we are not condoning or condemning the actions of anyone at this point, we are taking this matter seriously and will address any outcomes accordingly. As we continue to count down to the June primary, KPBS News will continue to reach out to candidates. You can see more of our election coverage at kpbs.org/election. The U.S. has pulled out of the nuclear deal with Iran. President Trump announced this decision today, while signing a memorandum reinstating all sanctions on the Iranian regime. He called the agreement poorly negotiated by the previous administration. Trump claims if the deal had continued, there would have been a nuclear arms race in the Middle East.
The fact is, this was a horrible, one-sided deal that should have never, ever been made. It didn't bring calm, it didn't bring peace, and it never will.
The agreement was signed by President Obama, the U.S. and Iran, restricting that nation's access to the nuclear weapons. U.S. allies have expressed regret over Trump's decision to leave the Iranian nuclear accord, calling it a threat to global efforts to contain nuclear weapons.
I'm William Brangham. Tonight on the NewsHour, former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak on President Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Former California Governor George Duke Majan has died. His family confirmed his death in a statement to the LA Times. Duke Majan was 89 and died at his home in Long Beach. The two-term Republican governor was first elected in 1982. He had a long career in Sacramento, which included time in the state legislature and as Attorney General. Duke Majan was the son of immigrants and the first California governor of Armenian descent. California is now the 5th largest economy in the world. Recent numbers from the U.S. Department of Commerce show the state's gross domestic product has reached $2.7 trillion, surpassing the U.K. to climb to number 5 from number 6. But some state lawmakers point out that California has some of the highest poverty and homeless rates in the country, something that shouldn't be with all this wealth.
Right now, last year we spent about $18 billion on so-called poverty programs. That makes those in poverty more comfortable, but it's not doing anything for them to enter the middle classes, which I think we want.
A statewide commission on homelessness was established last year to work with local agencies on investing in programs with a proven track record. Attendance is booming at SeaWorld, according to its latest quarterly report. The San Diego Union-Tribune reports more than 3 million people visited SeaWorld parks in San Diego and around the nation last year. The report shows the Orlando-based company saw a 15% increase in revenue during that period. SeaWorld CEO stepped down earlier this year. The company took a hit after the Blackfish documentary focused on SeaWorld killer whales. The dry and warm weather pattern continues around San Diego for the next couple of days with no sign of rain anytime soon. Erin Calandra has tonight's full forecast.
I hope you enjoyed your day today. We had some pretty nice weather. In the morning, of course, we had some clouds around the coast, but the rest of the day looking great with sunshine, and that's how it looked for the interior areas too. No rain on this radar. No, it is awfully dry, and it's going to stay that way too. Taking a look at a bigger picture, all of the southeast is looking pretty dry and warm too. Once you get into those interior areas, we're seeing triple-digit temperatures across the deserts. Notice to the north, there's a little bit of precipitation. With that, there's also going to be a cold front pushing to the south. We're not going to see any kind of rain out of that, but you'll notice a change in temperatures for the weekend. So 59 degrees tonight, partly cloudy, staying dry for everyone. The interior areas, Ramona at 49, Chula Vista at 56 degrees, and Mount Laguna 55 tonight, staying pretty clear. Oceanside tomorrow, great conditions, 73, San Diego 71, and in Mount Laguna 79, so that's pretty pleasant. In Borrego Springs, it is just unbearably hot at 106. Those temperatures are dangerous. If you're heading to the deserts, make sure you drink plenty of water and also try to get into some cooler air conditioning. Taking a look at the air quality. Yesterday yesterday it was great for everyone, but today from the interior areas to the coast, we're seeing moderate to air quality. That's not bad. It's just not as fantastic as it is further to the east, and that's how it's going to stay for the next day or so. Now, taking a look at what's going on for Wednesday, high pressure in place. That's why it is clear and dry, and also we're seeing that warm air just shooting up, getting scooped up and dumped here in the deserts. But along the coast, it is very pleasant. The Pacific, it is keeping us very comfortable. So Wednesday, Thursday, temperatures still in the 70s, but then that cold front moves through. You'll notice it's a bit breezy Friday, especially in the deserts and mountains. And for the weekend, we're in the upper 60s and dry. Wednesday, we're in the 80s, and then we drop down to the 70s in the interior areas for the weekend. In the mountains, from the 70s to the 60s and even the 50s on Saturday. And in the deserts, from the 100s to the 80s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra. Ebony, back to you.
Uber wants to take its rideshare network higher in the sky. The company is teaming up with NASA to explore putting flying taxis in the airspace over U.S. cities. NASA says it will begin simulations for what it calls urban air mobility. The announcement was made at the Uber Elevate Summit in Los Angeles that brings together tech and transportation leaders to discuss the future of aviation. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.